Today's couples love planning their weddings with Zola. That's why it's the fastest growing wedding platform. It's got everything couples need for their entire wedding planning journey, including finding their venue, their planner, and their vendors. And wedding pros love Zola, the sponsor of today's episode, just as much as couples do. And I'll tell you why later in this episode. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, a podcast that provides both education and inspiration for those of us in or interested in the weddings and event industry. If you missed last week's episode, it was my third conversation with Michelle Rego of Michelle Rego Destinations. Michelle never disappoints. She is so straightforward. It is an incredible new conversation, so be sure to check it out if you missed it. And today is a revisit of my original interview of floral designer Kiana Underwood of Tulipina, an internationally renowned floral design studio that specializes in creating bespoke experiences for luxury weddings and events. Her sold-out workshops are all over the world. Her book, Color Me Floral, covers the secrets to designing show-stopping monochromatic arrangements for each season. Kiana's work can be seen in numerous major publications, and be sure to check out her stunning Instagram feed with almost 400,000 followers at Tulipina Design. Enjoy this conversation with Kiana Underwood. Welcome to The Wedding Biz.
Hi, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So, it's funny. I thought that you were living in the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if I'm just missing the news, but discovered after talking to your husband, Nate, that you bought a small farm. Both of you bought a farm in, I think, the Hudson Valley area and basically moved to the other side of the United States, like an hour and a half north of New York City. Is that right?
Yes, we did something crazy that most people wouldn't do. And we moved all the way across the country. We bought this property about 2 years ago, and we wanted to have some land, unlike what we have in San Francisco, to be able to cultivate some flowers and such. And we loved it so much that 2 years later, we decided just to pick up and move.
Wow. And this is really out there, right? You're not near a busy cosmopolitan area.
I know it's quite a change for us. It's about an hour and 45 minutes from Manhattan, which is, I guess, close enough to be able to go into the city and back.
Yeah.
Since I take my child to music lessons in Harlem every weekend.
Oh, wow.
It's definitely different. We are in nature and definitely not cosmopolitan, but it's got so much beauty that it makes up for being far away from the city.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, when I was kind of reading things about you, I read that when you were young, your grandfather had a beautiful garden and your mother always had fresh cut flowers in the house. And I wonder if you would have discovered such a deep passion for flowers otherwise. Like, how do you feel that really was what got it started for you? Was it noticeable for you when you were a little girl that, oh my God, I love this?
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, it was such a part of my life growing up that I actually didn't notice it because it was just the way we lived. And I took it for granted as a young person since I pursued a completely different realm for my career, which was international economics. So, it wasn't until later in life that after I got my master's in international economics and started working and then I became a stay-at-home mom because I didn't love what I was doing. My husband recommended that I would start a business of floral design.
Can I stop right there? So,
yeah.
What was it that had Nate say such a thing to you? What was that all about?
Well, because just like you said, because this was such a part of my life, I, as a housewife, I entertained people. I had guests over, and it was always that we had fresh flowers in the house. So it was just always a part of entertaining. And when people would come over, they would be always amazed by the centerpieces I would have on my table or just the flowers that were around the house. And for me, that was just second nature. I mean, that's just really what I did because my mother did that, or my grandmother always loved flowers. And it was just, it's such a big, flowers are a big part of Persian culture. Our New Year is the first day of spring, and everything we do is very much has flowers involved. And so because of that, I never thought of it as a career because it was just a part of my life. But my husband said, well, everybody comes over and everybody loves what you do. And they would ask me, oh, who made these flowers? And I'd say, well, I did it. And they would say, well, can you make it for me? Or can you show me how to do it? And then my husband said, well, this could be your thing. And I had been really searching for that because I was, when I started this business, I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids and all under the age of 5, basically. And I was going a little insane, quite honestly. So when the youngest child went to kindergarten, my husband recommended, or at least told me, this could be your thing. You could have your own business. And it would be an outlet for you. And it really was. I mean, at first I thought it was such a ridiculous idea.
Well, can I ask, before that, were you thinking, in terms of, you're feeling like you need to do something, were you thinking of going back into some kind of international studies, economics, like a corporate kind of a job? Were you thinking about that?
I guess I was, because I felt that I had not used this. I got a degree from a very prestigious school in this field of international law, and I wanted to be a diplomat. And I made a mistake of leaving the East Coast because I got my master's in Washington, D.C. I left the East Coast and came back to the West Coast in San Francisco, and I got a job at a think tank at Stanford University. And there I had this very boring position. I wanted to do some research and writing on women's rights and all the subjects I had passion for. And this job really wasn't giving me that opportunity at all. And so once I got pregnant with my first child, I thought, oh, what a relief. Now I can be at home and I can work my job.
Oh, well, and I'm also thinking you grew up in Iran. When did you leave Iran? When you went to college?
I left Iran when I was 15, actually, and that was in 1990. And I came to San Francisco as a sophomore in high school.
Wow, a sophomore in high school. So did you live on your own? How did you do something like that?
No, I came with my family, my mother and father. They wanted a better life for their daughters. As you might know, Iran is a country where women have little rights.
Sure.
And they are oppressed.
Yep.
And the opportunities are very minimal for not just women, but the people of Iran. You either become a doctor or an engineer to be able to make the ends meet. And even at that, people don't have opportunities like they would have in this country.
Well, and if I could stay there for a minute, Kiana, this is really fascinating to me because I think it is a lot of, who you are today. So when you move over from an environment like that, a culture like that, and you come to what it's like, especially, did you say you went to the West Coast is where your family moved,
Yeah.
right? Like California, of all places in the United States.
Yes.
So, and you're a sophomore, so I guess you're probably around 15. What was that experience like for you when you first came here?
Well, listen, it was amazing. I mean, in some ways, I tell my children today that they don't understand what they have, having been born here. And you will never understand that unless you've come from another country. And for me, as a 15-year-old who was struggling in Iran, in school, I was struggling because teachers, I did not have a good experience academically being spending the first year of high school in Iran. And when I came here, I realized that for the first time, teachers can be your friends. They care about you. In fact, everybody in the school system cares about you. And that helped me flourish. I was not such a great student in Iran. I hated going to school. I hated my teachers. But when I came here, I realized that this was a whole different ballgame. People were here to help me. I had opportunities that were never possible in Iran, in this country. And I embraced that as somebody who had actually seen a different side of life.
Wow. So I can imagine that must have helped you feel now like there really was a chance for you to do whatever you felt like and not have this barrier. My gosh.
Yeah. And I mean, for me too, it was it was a cultural shock too, because I had never seen this. I went to high school in the middle of a city of San Francisco. I had never in my life seen this many Asians in one place.
Oh.
Because I love that I could experience such different cultural diversity and
be accepted too, right?
Absolutely. And yes, and be able to, be accepted and be able to flourish. And it was great. It was amazing. And that helped me throughout I think it gave me strength. It gave me self-confidence, and it made me realize that I could do anything that I wanted to.
Well, yeah, because then later when you're saying you were thinking of wanting to be a diplomat, that's a major step. And again, especially for a woman coming from Iran. And it's interesting that you wanted to be a diplomat, and here you are. We'll get to it later, but I mean, not that it's the same, but you are traveling, you're going around the world, and you're dealing with different cultures, and it must be a time. So when he suggested this moment when, like you say, your last child, I believe, had gotten into kindergarten, and you were getting antsy to do something, and you just didn't really know, you're thinking of getting a job. When he said that to you, like, what was your initial reaction?
I really thought it was ridiculous because I thought, first of all, there are so many amazing florists in San Francisco, and I hadn't really been in this industry. I am in some ways, very new to this industry because I've lived a whole life before this. And for me, it was a little bit scary because anytime you enter something new, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, how people will actually embrace you in that industry, and what you have to do to learn and navigate yourself within that industry. So I was a little scared because I thought, well, I would never be successful. Who would want me to make flowers for them? There are so many florists who have many years above me, and but honestly, I had nothing to lose because, as Nate said, he said, well, what do we have to lose? We'll make you a website. You can make a Facebook page, and you can just start making arrangements. And at the time, it wasn't like we had any overheads. Nathan was working a great job as a VP in a technology company. And so we had good money, and I didn't have to worry about the money that I would be spending on kind of exploring this new life.
Well, and before you go on, because I want to hear, I'd love to hear, what was that first step you made, and how did you start to get off the ground? Because you did grow very quickly, and we'll come to that in a minute. But I noticed a couple of minutes ago you mentioned in terms of being scared, and talking about that with your husband. And this makes me think, I did find a quote. It's a little bit long, but I'd love to read it, that I read in some interview that you said, or maybe your website, I don't know, but
sure.
You talk about fear, and so you said, I consider myself a driven person and have worked hard to make Tulipina what it has become. I believe that there is a spark of creative genius in everyone, and yet many people don't dig in and push themselves past the fear to get their talent out into the world. I would encourage those out there who are thinking about making a career change or taking up a creative hobby or business to set their fears aside and embrace their ambition. The upside is significant, and the downside is often far less onerous than people think. You were really talking a lot and thinking about that issue of fear.
Yes. If there's one thing that I've always been able to overcome in my life is my fears. I mean, basically, I don't mind getting out of my comfort zone. And you can see that, and I can tell you about that in every stage of the growth of my business. It's only been being able to step out of that comfort zone that I have been able to build what I have built. And I think that most people don't want to take that chance. It's about taking a chance. It's about saying, I'm going to pick up and move to the other side of the country, even after I've lived in the West Coast for 20 something years of my life, to explore something new and see what else is out there.
Well, what did the fear look like to you? And when he talked about starting your own business and a floral design, I mean, how did it manifest for you that you could then work on setting it aside and pushing past it?
Well, I think very simple things is, I think if nobody knows you, most of the time people aren't going to be very nice to you. I didn't know my way at all around the flower market in San Francisco, for example. It's a very small portion of it. So I decided that I would go and find out what it's about. Like, what is the flower market of San Francisco about? And so the first year that I went, within the first 6 months, nobody wanted to talk to me because they had never seen me. If I asked what a flower's name was, they would get irritated with me. And it was not the greatest experience. So that was just the beginning. But once people got to know me, especially at the Flower Mart, within a matter of a year or two, and they could then see who this person was and capable of creating, that was a whole different story. But when people don't know you, they're often not willing to help you or to even be nice to you.
Well, I guess you're talking about people being judgmental. So just so I understand, so when you would come back to the flower mart over and over, you mean they would see what you were doing and that's how they started to look at you differently?
It was when they began to see who Tulipina was, and 2 years or 3 years into Instagram and everything that I put out there on the internet, then they would say, I never forget one time, I think it was about 2 years into it, there was this one guy who wasn't very nice to me, never said hello to me. And then, and I'd always buy from him. And I think it was maybe 2 years into my business, he came to me and he said, "Are you Tulipina?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And he goes, "Oh my God, I've been following you on Instagram and what you create is beyond." And then, of course, it was a friendship, a lovely friendship. And from there on, he was always waving at me from across, the flower market. And this was the case with every single person at the flower market. And it wasn't because they were mean. It's just that they don't know you. So they don't know if they're going to see you again or who you are.
So when you didn't get, the initial reaction, prior to that 2 years, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine myself in your shoes. You're now having to really just go at it by yourself.
Yeah, and I did, because this was the beginning. The beginning was, I don't even care what they don't like me. That's fine. I'm going to find out what the name of this flower is anyway. I'm going to bug him for it. And I mean, I really did not know the name of flowers simply because I don't speak English. I mean, it's not my mother tongue. English is not my mother tongue. And so I had to learn all of these things as I was learning my own style. So I was going into the flower market, I was buying the flowers, and I was experimenting, and I was seeing what it was that made me happy and what it was that made me more creative. And so that was the way it was in the beginning. But once they all got to know me, it was a different story, and they loved me and they embraced me today, and they're amazing. As far as the industry was concerned, that was a whole different story, because once they get to know you because you've become popular, then everybody's giving you the cold shoulder, because it's like, now, who the heck do you think you are? Where did you come from? And why do you think you can have this many followers on Instagram? And so this was the attitude I got pretty much from everyone in the industry, with the exception of a few.
Huh. But what is it that you did for those 2 years to be able to get these people to see you? I mean, again, like at this point, you have over 300.
Yes, I would go to the flower market once a week. The money that I lived in an affluent area where all the women that got together, the preschool moms, they were into brand name purses and jewelry and this and that. For me, it wasn't about that. Instead of spending that money on those types of things, I decided that I was going to take whatever allowance I had per week and go to the flower market and explore and see what it is that I can create, because that gave me happiness. It gave me an outlet. And so I would make arrangements, even if I didn't have any business, which I didn't in the first year, with the exception of a few preschool moms who would have parties and such. I didn't really have any business. And I would create arrangements. I would put them on Facebook. I would put the pictures on Instagram. And then slowly I would realize that there was interest among the audience. And it was I think it was the beginning of Instagram, sort of. It was in 2011, and people were not using Instagram like they are today, that's for sure. And so I used that to my advantage, the fact that there is now this vehicle where you can show yourself off. And so I did that, because I wasn't about to spend the money on, I don't know, some ad in Martha Stewart magazine. I didn't even have that kind of money to start with. And so I thought, I'm just going to promote myself, and I'm going to find what it is in this today's age of internet, that we can go ahead and put ourselves out there for free and get eyeballs on ourselves.
Well, and if I could ask too, I read that you had talked a great deal about the consistency of great floral photography was so key to establishing your brand, right? So I imagine for you, it wasn't only just simply putting pictures on Instagram, but it sounds like you had a real, very specific strategy about how you would even create and present the images of your work, which, right, you say is so critical.
I sort of fell into that because my husband, Nate, always had amazing cameras. He's a great photographer. And we sort of started, because he's always been such a champion of mine, he would take the photos of my arrangements and together we would put these photos on Instagram. And we would see that people just love it. Or I would put, one day I would say, you know what, I'm not going to go with a traditional color scheme because if you look, everyone is always doing the traditional creams and off-whites and everything is always so well put together, the way it should be, quote unquote, accepted. And I thought, you know what, today I think I'm going to put purple next to red and see what happens. Or I'm going to take this one flower that nobody else would ever think acceptable to put in this arrangement and see what happens. And sure enough, people loved it because they were now seeing things that was again outside of their comfort zone and still beautiful.
Well, it's interesting. And that right there. Now, so did you feel a risk doing that, or did you just feel like, no, I'm just going to do it? Was it not even a question for you?
I didn't even care. I thought, this is my arrangement. I guess that's what self-confidence is. You put it out there, and if some people are going to hate you for it because you're not following the regular norm of what a floral design should be. And some people are like, wow, she's got guts. I like this. This is unlike anything else I've ever seen. And there they began to see what is today the Tulipina style of floral design that sort of stops people on their tracks and they say, well, that's a Tulipina arrangement.
I'd like to also go there too, the creative part of this for you. Do you feel like, my thing, is music. I have a business in music, and I never really think about, well, this is why I think this way. And, or this is how I'm going to present music. And I don't think, well, this is different. It's just kind of my thing. Is it the same with you? Or is there something in particular that inspires you that you're trying to achieve through the creative aspect of what you're doing?
I definitely don't think of pleasing anyone as I am doing my work. I think the most important for me is if I like what I'm doing, if I'm proud of it. Through that, I think I've created this whatever style that is today my style. And I think it's because of that which people actually like it, because I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm simply doing what it is that I think looks good. And I like to think of, and when I think about making an arrangement, I think about painting with flowers because I think it's so fun to take a flower, look at it closely, and see all the different colors and the nuances within that one stem. And then if you can recreate that in an arrangement, that's really beautiful.
Well, and I read, I think it was an article in Vogue, they described your style. It said garden-style designs are filled with explosive color, often asymmetrical, and made up of unexpected exotic ingredients. I love that. That kind of sums up what you're saying, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I like to be exotic. I think, I'm an exotic person because I'm not from America and I come from a different part of the world. And I like to show that through my arrangements.
You mentioned that it's like painting. I love that image. I read somewhere too that you say that music and art influences your work. How is that? How is that the case?
So music is such a huge part of my life. It always has been. My mother really insisted upon me taking some piano lessons, and she's always been really passionate about music. She's very much a passionate person. My mother is. So I think music moves me in a way that I could cry. When I listen to a piece by Wagner or by Bach or any of these amazing composers, I could easily just cry. Or a piece by Queen, some of those lyrics and some of those that music that's put along together with it, and that to me is what drives my creativity. And then, of course, the old paintings. When you look at the old paintings, they are very much. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of color, and they have abundance. And those are all the things that I love. And so when I look at an old Dutch master's painting, I love that I could, I think to myself, well, I could bring that to life and I could make a real life version of what was created 300 years ago. So that's how I'm inspired by those things.
I'm thinking with painting, I mean, I love Impressionism, and I'm thinking back in the day, that was such a risk for those painters at the time,
Exactly.
right? They were mixing colors that weren't typical and showing these images in kind of unclear ways. I mean, what you're speaking of makes me think of that.
Right. Yes. And I love that because they took risks and they didn't have fear. Or maybe they did, but they still took the risk.
Oh, yeah. Well, and when you talk about the music, so are you listening to this music while you're creating? You're thinking of...
Absolutely.
You are.
Yes, very much. When I'm alone, I like to create when I'm alone the most, basically. And it doesn't happen very often because I'm doing events and obviously I'm surrounded by people who are helping me. But there's always music. And I think that it brings the best out in me.
Why is Zola the fastest growing wedding platform? Because Zola does things differently. They've created a subscription-free platform that works for wedding professionals with free listings tailored to what you do that makes your business look great. And there are no paid placements or stacked search results. They are all validated leads. Zola will match you with pre-qualified couples who they know are a good fit for your style and fee structure. If you want to connect, it's easy. And there are no annual fees or commitment. Just pay for the leads you are interested in at a price that's fair. You're in control. Then there's Zola's excellent customer support, ready to answer any question and help in any way. They'll even create your free listing for you. So grow your business with the wedding platform that's proud to do things differently. Go to zola.com/Andy. That's ZOLA.com/Andy to start your free listing and even make your first connections for free. Let's talk about events since you bring that up. I know that you do a limited small number of luxury bespoke weddings, both locally and destination wise. I think you said around 8 to 10. Why you don't really want to scale in that sense?
Well, I think that what I think about when it comes to events is bringing art to events. I don't want to be yet another florist who is creating mass production for another large event. I want to be someone who is making spectacular beauty for an event. And for that, I need to be involved in every event. And there are only so many events I can be involved in as one person and as this boutique floral design business that we are to create art. And so for that, I have to only take a limited number of weddings per year. So
can you tell me about your process when you are working with a couple from the time you meet them through to the actual event? Because obviously this is different, right? Now you're not creating something purely of your own imagination. You're working with a couple, you're working most likely at that level with also a planner, a designer, an event designer. What is your process like?
So most of our weddings are brought to us by planners because of the budget. So when I'm approached by a bride, it's oftentimes, I know that they don't have the budget for what I do. So we basically get approached by planners. They're the ones who recommend us. Or sometimes it is a bride who likes my work who will go to her planner and say, I want this person to be my florist. And so the bride that likes my work 85% of the time allows me the creativity that I can bring into her wedding. And by that, I mean, she'll say, here's my color palette, do what you do best. And to me, that's a dream bride because then I will create the best that I possibly can because I'm given the creative freedom to do so.
Can you tell me a story perhaps of a favorite one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have many favorite brides, but there is a recent one that we had last year. She was a little older and getting married for the first time. And this woman was probably the kindest, most wonderful bride who loved everything I did and loved color, which is something I love, and obviously had the budget for everything that she wanted. And she was willing to step outside of the box and do something special, which was, it was a 3-day event. It was, the welcome dinner was one color. The reception was another color. The rehearsal dinner was like a fiesta. And all of these make you as a designer excited because you get to work on special things. and bring someone's vision to life who has so much vibrance on their own.
And what kind of challenges do you run into?
Well, so I've got two types of brides I work with. And while I love all of them and they're amazing clients, I think there's the bride who really loves my style and wants me for me and what I do. And then there's the bride who wants me for the brand that it brings to their team, I guess, team of vendors. And so oftentimes I think that the one that's looking for me, to me as a brand, is a little different to work with than the one who loves my work genuinely and doesn't care about my brand or what following I have on Instagram and what magazine I wound up in. So, I mean, I love them both equally, but I love the bride who lets me do what I do and loves my work for what it is.
Have you had any just really crazy challenges, problems that came up in the moment, at one of these luxury weddings?
Well, honestly, there's always something. I won't lie, but I think that we've always been able to overcome it. I mean, like we had a wedding in the LA area, and we had like a mother who was totally like the glam 80s style, look for floral design because that's what looks quote unquote expensive. And so people walk in and they're wowed by these big balls of hydrangea and things that I don't do, obviously. And then the bride wanted something like what I do. She really loved my style and she was younger, she's chic, she's just of a different generation. And I think that the mother did walk over as we had just done this beautiful asymmetric garden-filled arch for a very big structure. And she walked over to me and in front of all of my team members said, "What is this? This looks like I just did it myself."
Oh my God.
And I was just so upset because there's nothing worse than you putting your heart into an event and somebody walking over and telling you this. And then, of course, as the day went by and as her guests came over, and every single guest was wowed by the fact that this was not your everyday typical floral design, that this was art. And they all went to her and said that to her, that they were so amazed by this floral design that they had never seen anything like it. And of course, the bride herself was very apologetic and she loved everything. The mother the next day calls me and apologizes to me for, 10 minutes, leaving me a message on my Instagram, my Instagram direct message, but also on my voicemail and also a text message apologizing and taking it back.
Wow, that's a big apology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that clients, obviously these corporate or fundraising gala or especially weddings, they're so emotional and people are, get anxious, and I do think that sometimes that comes out on us. And then I find the same thing though, when their guests come up to them and say, "Oh my God," then they can finally kind of relax about that. And sometimes I try to remind myself in the moment, okay, I know this is going to change. They're just anxious right now.
I mean, yeah, like I knew I had done. And for me, I create a beautiful scene because I don't want my name on something crappy, first and foremost. So I have to be happy with what the results are. And nobody has ever complained. And this was probably the only thing I've ever been so disappointed by.
And how about when you're doing destination events, especially if it's overseas? What do you do about a team? Are you bringing people, or how are you? It seems like such a challenge to me.
It really, it can be, but we have, through our relationships, we have built connections and contacts with around the world that makes it a lot easier for us to do destination weddings, especially because that's really what we do, destination. And in Europe, there is a team in Como that I work with, and they're amazing. I love them. And anywhere else in Asia, I have another couple. Because I teach internationally, I've been able to find amazing people through my workshops who have now become sort of the Tulipina family, and they are the freelancers that I pull from depending on different parts of the world.
Wow, what an incredible way to be able to find people. And, in a moment, I want to come back to workshops. But I'm also wondering, in the industry, any industry, but certainly the issue of pricing is such, oh boy, such a sensitive one. And I also read that at some point you mentioned that it's commensurate with the floral artistry we provide. How do you determine that? How do you put a number on that?
Well, I mean, it's hard because in this industry, we will never if anybody wants us to bid on something, we'll never win because we're always going to be more expensive than anybody else who's probably bidding on that event. So back to the whole thing of anyone who comes to us really wants our style and really, really loves what we do and appreciates it and wants to pay for it. It's sort of like, I was speaking to a lovely wedding planner a couple of weeks ago in New York City, and she described me, which I loved. She said, the way I talk about you to my clients is, this is your couture floral design. Just like I would sell a couture gown to them, a couture gown maker to them. This is how I would talk about you. You are a couture floral designer. And oftentimes those are not cheap. So for me, it's, we basically, we don't stem count. So we don't ever say, well, here's how much it would be for a medium arrangement of this style versus a large arrangement, because that's just not what we do. And so we price it based on the arrangements that we create, and they're all the same. It's not like I'm going to charge one person differently for this arrangement than I would for another person. So we're not cheap. It's like, I would say it's a difference in what you pay for a Coach purse versus what you pay for a Gucci purse or a Louis Vuitton purse.
Yeah. And you were mentioning, a minute ago, we were talking about the workshops. Can you tell me more about those? I know that you teach groups worldwide. You also have online and live webinars, right? You teach one-on-one. Is that right?
Yes. Last year I taught a lot worldwide, actually. And I'm trying to cut back on that a little bit because I really want to do just a few, like maybe 2 or 3 really amazing international workshops per year. And I'm trying to concentrate more on weddings and destination events. So this year, my first international workshop will be in Rome, and that's already sold out. It was sold out within a few days. And I don't know where I'm going to go after that. Honestly, I don't have any plans internationally yet. Maybe, later in the summer, I'll be doing one in Singapore. But I started this whole workshop thing by stepping outside of my fear and comfort zone.
How so?
Because I think it was 2015, that I decided I wanted to do a workshop in Russia. A lovely Russian editor had written about my work in a Russian magazine, and I got wind of that. And I contacted her and I asked her if she wanted to help me do a workshop in Russia. And it was a very scary prospect because I had no idea if I would even be able to sell a workshop in Russia. And my husband encouragingly told me, well, think of it this way. If you sell it, that's great. If you don't, you will have just taken a nice vacation to Moscow. And so when you think of it that way, then it becomes a little bit more digestible. So needless to say, I pulled the plug. I mean, I did it, and it turned out to be an amazing event. It sold out in a couple of days, and some of the hippest, most wonderful young florists around the country came to my workshop. And that's sort of what started this whole chain of events with international workshops.
Well, and I know that you also, for people who might not be able to travel, that you've got a video series as well, right? Like a subscription video series?
Yes, I've got a video series. And just recently we started these, to sort of reinvent ourselves, we started this webinar series that we're doing. And the very first one was on destination weddings, and the second one we did was just on single floral designs. And it's been really great. I think it's great because I get to interact with the audience live, and that's something that people really love. So we've been doing that as of recent.
Yeah, and at the end, we'll get the links for this. We'll put it in the show notes too. But also, you have a book. I think it's been some years now, right? Called "Color Me Floral." I understand it covers the secrets to designing show-stopping monochromatic arrangements for each season.
Yes. So the book came out last March. I wrote this book because when I first started this journey back in 2011, I looked for some inspiration out there in other designers or even in books that would help me understand how you can create beautiful designs. And I quickly realized that nobody actually was willing to show you how to do it. There were many books, beautiful books of beautiful floral arrangements, but nobody wanted to show you how to do any of it. And so I had to learn on my own, which was fine. But so I decided that I would write a book that would first of all cover color, which is something I love to do, and sort of challenge myself because it's a book on 10 colors and what each color would look like in every season based on what you have available to you. And it's got step-by-step instructions on how to do every arrangement. So there are 40 arrangements and each arrangement has step-by-step instructions.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm also thinking you've got a lot going on. You've got so much going. And you have 3 young kids, right? Still pretty young. How old are they?
Yeah. So my kids are 15, 13, and 12. And believe me, I never realized that it would be so difficult to raise teenagers. I never imagined. And I would give anything to have them back in diapers right now.
Wait a minute. Oh, my God.
It's just so hard.
It is hard. It's funny, even though we ourselves were teenagers, it's a whole nother thing as an adult to parent them. So how do you, because this is a challenge, so many of us have, if we have kids or just whatever else, maybe very important hobbies or something, but a relationship, how do you balance with your personal life, your business life?
Right. It's very hard. I will have to say that these past few years have been some of the hardest because here I am, this driven person who wants to be able to say yes to every project that's brought to me that's exciting. And, I want to keep pushing through and elevating my business. And then at some point I have to stop and think, well, is this going to be great for my kids? My being away from home, number one, I miss them. And number two, how is that going to, hurt? It's going to hurt my kids because if I'm not here for 10 days straight or 2 weeks straight, traveling the world and teaching or doing events, what will that do to us as a family? And so one thing that's helped my family is that my husband stopped work. He quit his job as a tech VP and really began to work on our business about 2 years ago. And that meant that Nate was home and around. One parent was always around while, at least Nate was around while I was gone traveling and working. And that made it a lot more possible for me to do the things that I've been doing. So that's how we do it. And sometimes I just say no. Like I was invited to go do a large exhibition in Shanghai back in January, and it probably would have been great for my business, but I said no because I didn't want to be. I had just been in Shanghai, and then I was in Japan in December, and I decided that I just wasn't going to go anywhere in January and be home with the children.
And I think there's times obviously where it's so hard to turn something down, and I always believe that in a way, and maybe it's not explainable initially, maybe it's not that obvious, but that in some way it's actually going to help me in the long run. Like maybe having the downtime, having the connection with friends and family, right? And being recharged and then coming back. Yeah. I always like to believe that, I don't want to feel like I have to take every single job.
No, I love that. I love that I get, especially because of where we live now. It's so beautiful and it's so quiet that sometimes you need that. For me, that being in touch with nature and sort of hibernating with my children at home and, practicing our music. They both of my boys play musical instruments. One plays the piano, one plays the violin, and just being able to concentrate on them, helping them with their practice and really just giving my family my 100% makes me a better mother, but also makes me a better businesswoman because I think I go back to work really happy and, as you said, recharged.
So, as we get ready to wrap up, when you think down the line, do you think much ahead, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what you will be doing? Do you think like that?
I mean, I have goals for sure. I think that we have just begun our 5-year plan of building our property here in New York, and we're about a year into it. And for me, that's great. I love that we have this 5-year goal for what we're going to do with this amazing property that we have here. But I also see myself as continuing to doing amazing events and continuing to work with some amazing people that I have partnered with in the last few years, and just keeping Tulipina going and being sort of a leader in the industry.
And before we go, what are you going to do with your property? Now you've got me interested.
Yeah. So we've got about 9 acres of beautiful land and property that sort of needs work. Basically, it's got a lot of different little outbuildings, and my dream is to build this beautiful glass house from which I can teach. Because I have a lot of people who come internationally to learn from me. And so I want that to be where I'm able to teach from, where I can have photo shoots from, and cultivate beautiful flowers just for my own use, and surround myself with beautiful gardens. So that's the plan.
Oh, sounds wonderful. Well, so Kiana, what is the best way for people to find out about you, your company, and also all of this, the workshops, the videos, the webinars? I know people are going to want to know.
So the best way is to, there are always 2 channels for me. I think the biggest is my website. And then of course, Instagram. You can, I usually try to look at my direct messages as much as I can, but I think my website is the best. It's tulipina.com, and if you want to be in contact, you can send me a note. If you have any inquiries, I'm always there to respond. And if I'm not there, Nate is too.
And you have an incredible over 300,000 followers, and yet you will answer the direct messages. That's wonderful.
I try. Some of them I miss, no doubt, but I try.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Kiana Underwood. Be sure to check out her website, which is tulipina.com. That's TULIPINA.com. On social media, it is Tulipina Design. And be sure to check out the show notes on your cell phone's podcast app or our website of theweddingbiz.com. And remember to go to zola.com/Andy to create your free listing and get your first few connections for free. Again, that's zola.com/Andy. And be sure to check out Preston Bailey's show, Stop and Smell the Roses, and also Sean Lowe's show, The Business of Being Creative, both at theweddingbiznetwork.com or by their show name on your cell phone podcast app. And be sure to follow The Wedding Biz, particularly on Instagram at The Wedding Biz, and we'll catch you next week with a new episode.